All right, we're back. Dynasty Trades in 5. I'm Clay.
I'm Shane.
I'm Scott. Another delightful Dynasty Trades in 28, 32. We'll see where it goes, but it's a good topic.
Yeah,
I kind of
pigeonholed us. I suckered them into doing a longer show here. No, so this is going to be part 2 of the startup strategy show. Check out part 1 after this one. You don't need to watch that one first. But just so you know, as a channel, we do trade shows, we do individual player profiles, and then we do strategy type shows like this. So browse around the channel, take a peek at the playlists, and yeah, subscribe if we earn your business. All right, let's get going. Scott, let's talk about roster construction a little bit more. So how many QBs, RBs, wide receivers, what are you thinking?
One of the popular strategies last year that's won the last couple years has been basically just fade running back. Everyone knows Dynasty Trades in 5. We hate running backs. We're always looking at ways to get extra value by pivoting down on running backs, pivoting off running backs before they expire. But, it's a little harder to pinpoint who exactly the next man up running backs are going to be. So I think you do have to take one of two approaches. You have to go into it and say, okay, let's say I have 12 teams, start 10, 30 roster spots. Okay, so your roster spot total matters here. If it's 20, if it's 22, then you don't have as much freedom to do this. But if it's 30, I almost look at it and say, let me lock down my quarterbacks. Give me my top 2 elite quarterbacks, a top 10 or better tight end. I'll take a QB3 in there. Does it really matter which one it is, as long as it's somebody that I think I can plug and play in case there's an injury or if COVID ramps up again next year. And then I fill with as many receivers inside this tier. It can also be rookie picks. We know this class is perfect. If you're in a startup and you don't know what receiver to take a draft pick. I know we're not necessarily in on the 2022 class, but the 109 in 2022 is probably just as good as the wide receiver 40 or the wide receiver 35. Whatever range that might be, it's either receiver or draft pick. So let's say I have 12 or 13 picks out of the way, and I only have maybe one running back or 2 running backs. I can now allocate the rest of my roster spots with 2 things. One, running backs. And I may be wrong on half those running backs, right? I may draft 7 or 8 guys. By the time we get to the season, don't want them anymore. Cut them. They're not on a depth chart. They didn't sign somewhere. They're on a practice squad or they got cut and they're still a free agent. There's a bunch more you can pick up on waivers. Or rookie picks. That's something we'll talk about a little bit later. Taking rookie picks right now when there's a tie, even if there's not a tie and you're like, man, I really like that player. I don't think I would take this pick over that player in a trade league. Take the draft pick. You can defer your decision until later on. There's value in the fact that, hey, I have a 108. I have a 112. I don't have to act on that for 3 or 4 more months. If I draft wide receiver 35, that could be a player that gets crushed in free agency, gets crushed in the rookie draft, and it doesn't have liquidity. So my rosters would look very much high-end quarterbacks, tight ends, receivers, and then every other possible roster spot is running back and draft picks, and that's probably at least 50% of my slots. Shane.
Scott. So I was just looking at DLF's ADP, and yeah,
his energy he's coming out with. So I'd even cut you off, but
I'd move that up. I'm sorry. Wide receiver 25 is about where I'm starting to take the picks, right? Because from 25 to 40, but the point that you're making is from 25 through probably wide receiver 60, they're roughly the same dude. One of those guys might give you a little more high-end production. One might give you some more consistency, but they're all going to be the same guy. So I'd take the shot on the rookie pick and hope that, remember once upon a time, Justin Jefferson was getting drafted at 110, 111, 112. I know no one will admit to it being in any rookie drafts, that happened in. I'll admit to it. I was in several where he fell that far. And I actually got him at 201 in one draft before the NFL draft. So I know it's happened. So I'm anything after the wide receiver 25, I'll start taking picks because even if I don't like the class, someone's going to like the class. Third quarterback, similar to Scott, I'm just going to grab a Jimmy Garoppolo somewhere. Not Teddy Bridgewater. He's a lot worse than Jimmy Garoppolo, though Scott refuses to admit it. Yeah. Running backs. I at the end of the drafts, I'm probably going to take some out of default. You know what I mean? It's just going to be well, I know this guy, so I'll pick him up. And if I accidentally hit on one of those guys that ends up being taken over a job next year, I'm going to take credit for it. Like I knew what I was doing, but you have no idea who's going to be the backup running back in February. You're probably better off taking a shot on wide receivers, to be quite honest with you. Wide receivers like DJ Chark, someone that might have hit in the past that I know they have some truthers. I love grabbing guys like Juju, who I think are going to leap in value. Yep. Basically in the middle of the rounds, that's what I'm looking to do. Middle round drafts, looking for guys that I think can increase in value by a good bit, 2-3 rounds over the next year. And obviously a lot of that's going to be based off narrative, but that's really all you have to separate them after, some of these players have been in the league for 4 or 5 years.
If you're going into a team, and how many times on this show have we gone through a player and said, okay, this is where he kind of tiers in his positional landscape, whether it's a receiver or a running back or a quarterback. And your immediate thought when you're in a startup, we've all been there. How many startups have you guys done? I've done so many over the last 7 years that there's always those startups where you start to panic. And I did this early on in my Dynasty career too. You start to panic. You look at your list or your tiers, whatever you're drafting off of, and you're going, oh crap, I need a QB2 or I need a QB3. I need an RB2. And these are the only guys in those tiers. And that's typically just based off of what you feel is secure right now. You mentioned Jimmy Garoppolo. He's the perfect example. A lot of people think he's going to get a starting job. He probably is a starter next year, but there's others that people don't feel that same way. So in a startup, let's just say there's a huge quarterback run. Someone's going to look at that board and go, man, Jimmy G is one of the only 2 or 3 guys left that I even feel comfortable drafting. So someone's going to go, okay, I need to move up. He's the guy that I want. If you happen to be sitting in that range, you can pull off a deal and go, okay, I get a second plus a pick in 3 rounds. Someone's going to probably leave me I don't know, Davis Mills or Marcus Mariota or someone like that. And yeah, you don't have to take that player, but understand that you actually just created that process deal that we talk about all the time. Capitalize on where these pockets are in Dynasty where people just think they know what's going to happen. So I think there's some trade back opportunities, but usually what you're pivoting off of is, people think they know what's going to happen, and you're just kind of you're exploiting the fact that there's a ton of variance.
So what are your thoughts on the strategy of hoarding QBs and then either keeping them or hoarding them to then sell to have some leverage over the league? What are your thoughts on having a bunch of QBs, drafting 5 of them?
So here's the problem with hoarding QBs, right? You're assuming that the market is just going to flood, the market is just going to come after you because you have all the quarterbacks. At some point, everyone else in the league is going to go, did you know Shane has 7 quarterbacks? We need to go get some of those quarterbacks. They're going to work in conjunction. If they wanted those quarterbacks, they could have drafted them in the startup. Obviously, the positional, the reasons they didn't, they might have gone JT over, I don't know, Justin Herbert or whatever, something like that. But I'm talking about in the later end. Me hoarding Jimmy G, Jared Goff, Carson Wentz, Teddy Bridgewater. In the future, yes, I could sell all those for second rounders, maybe, because I'm not getting first rounders in sharp leagues. So I rather hoard good players, period, regardless of position. I want 3 because I want 3. I want 3 because I need 3 because of buys, injuries, and whatnot. I don't feel the need to hoard a bunch in the hopes that I can trade later in the detriment of building my team during that startup.
So let's just say you do some crazy thing where you trade up. Let's say you pick at the 106 and the 207 in a 12-team league, right? And then you somehow trade up and get another top 15 pick. And you just say, you know what, I'm going to go 3 quarterbacks. What you've accomplished is you're not getting as much value. I have a league where I did that, where I have Deshaun Watson, Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray. I'm just waiting. Now, it's a 14 team, so it's a little different. The scarcity is different. But I'm holding them and waiting until I now control when I want to trade them, right? I control the market. In a startup, if you did that, you don't win by having those 3 because immediately your mind is going to say, okay, I have 3 of the top 12 quarterbacks. Who's going to give me a Godfather offer? And like Shane said, probably 8 of the 12 teams looked at you doing that and didn't do anything to stop it. So why are they going to turn around and trade you double in 2 weeks because they really need one? Most people aren't going to behave that way. But where you really get the value is, somebody might have taken Matthew Stafford in the second round of the startup, or Kirk Cousins in the early third, or Derek Carr in the early third, because they're panicking and they're scared of not getting the quarterback. That's where hoarding it makes sense. It isn't the value you got. It's the cascading value a round or two later where somebody reaches. I mean, how many startups do we see last year where there's always that person that took Tom Brady in the fourth or the fifth, I'm going to get 2 years out of him. And then what happened? You know what I mean? Like that's where you win. As soon as those guys start coming off the board, the low end QB2s or lower, you just pump your fist like, yes, done. I achieved what I wanted. Maybe not because I have all the top guys, but I'm with Shane. The days of I'm going to take 5 quarterbacks and 4 of them be outside the top 12 and think that I'm going to turn around and be flipping them for firsts. Like, you either have suckers in your league, or if you're playing with, guys like us, people are just going to look at you like, okay, yeah, great. You have Mayfield and Matt Ryan and Jared Goff and Jimmy G. Cool. I mean, how many times do you guys see that deal where the team that lost Tom Brady immediately goes and trades their 2023 first and overpays? I don't see that often anymore. 3 or 4 years ago, yeah, there was always somebody that's like, oh, that guy's a starter. I need to give up a first. Now, it just doesn't happen that much. So I don't know. I just don't think it's a viable strategy now unless you have suckers in the league. That's the bottom line.
If you have suckers in your league, load up on those quarterbacks and trade them all off.
Yeah. But, do your diligence to confirm whether you're with a bunch of suckers. Let's talk about one QB, the exact opposite of hoarding QBs in a super flex. One QB. Who wants to go first? Whoever is in a one QB and is not in a super flex, let me just throw this out there. Join a super flex startup immediately. Hit us up. We're gonna do a watcher league.
Well, let me go because we were talking a little bit before we jumped on air. I'm fine with grabbing Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, right after maybe the mid wide receiver ones are off the board. Or excuse me, mid wide receiver twos, not ones. Jesus, mid wide receiver twos. Same with running backs, and then I'll never draft another quarterback for as long as I'm alive in that league. Except in rookie drafts, I'll inevitably draft some rookie starting quarterback at like 210, because that's the other thing. Rookie quarterbacks are always joining the league, and in one quarterback leagues, they're always falling to the second round. Guys like Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, you could have gotten the second round and just taken a shot on them and said, all right, maybe one of these guys is going to be the next Kyler and one's going to be the next Josh Allen. If they're not, whatever, I don't care. I wasted a 210 on them in a one quarterback league.
12 team where you're chasing 2 of the elite quarterbacks. If 2 or 3 teams try that, all of a sudden they've kind of pushed the needle to where you're going to have a couple teams that are reaching later on because there's just not enough bodies. I mean, that's where you get into the scarcity factor. In one QB, there's no scarcity, but there also isn't the incentive to hoard the quarterbacks either. I have much less incentive in a one QB league to say I'm going to lock in 2 of the top 8 quarterbacks. That may give me an advantage in terms of I have a top 4 quarterback or better every single week because I can platoon, I can play the best matchups, I can avoid bad weather, all that stuff. Like, I'm always locking in a positional advantage, but it probably isn't worth the acquisition cost that I have to pay. I probably have to pay, 2 top 6 round picks to get 2 of the top 6 quarterbacks in a single QB. And I'm going, okay, I really don't want to pass up one of those skill players that I'm getting when I draft that second QB. So there's not as much incentive to hoard, but I think Shane makes a great point. The place to find them is in rookie drafts, and they're probably undervalued in rookie drafts because you've basically skipped to the front of the line. You go, okay, if I think Malik Willis can be Jalen Hurts at the floor, I probably want to take him higher in my rookie draft, because if you just transplant him into a startup and he's Jalen Hurts, you're tempted to say, I can lock in that positional advantage, and the 203, 204 rookie pick is a lot cheaper than a 5th or 6th round startup pick, where you probably would take those quarterbacks in that range. So I think that's where you get them cheapest, and people kind of ignore them because they're not scarce. Like, everyone in the league probably already has quarterbacks. But I think the flaw in one quarterback leagues is, and I used to be this way, but we see how the quarterbacks score right now in the dynasty landscape. You don't want to wait too long. I've learned this kind of the hard way. It's a little bit of a different game because it's redraft and it's shallower rosters, but you see this in redraft. There's always like that jockeying of when do the quarterbacks come off the board, and like, you can tell as soon as the first one comes off the board, you get a couple people that are chasing the positional advantage. They're not chasing the scarcity. They know quarterbacks can be had. You never go into a startup in a one QB league and you say, I'm scared I'm not going to get a starter.
Yep.
It's just there becomes a point where you really don't want the starters that are available anymore. So you don't want to end up drafting 3 QB low-end QB2s and then go, okay, well, I can platoon. Well, that sounds great on paper until you actually have to make the lineup decision every week. But you're constantly going like, okay, what do I have to add to my Ryan Tannehill to get, Kyler Murray? And it's like, you really can't add too much because the person that has Kyler Murray, like you have to buy out their positional advantage. It's not even about what is he worth in picks. You have to disrupt their entire roster construction.
My one quarterback league last year, I had Justin Herbert and Kyler Murray. Not by design. I got one in a rookie draft. You know what I mean? Just because. And people kept sending me offers for him, and it was all low ball stuff. It was like, here's a second and a third. I'm like, how does that help me? Like, that doesn't help me in any way. Like, I can't even attach that to something and then get a better player. Like, it's so marginal that it's not worth it. I'll just let them sit on my roster. And every offer I made back was, no, you give me a low end wide receiver 1 or a mid wide receiver 2. Like, that's the only thing that would move me for him.
Did you ever try packaging one like with a first and getting a top 12 running back or receiver? I guess all those got declined.
Yeah.
All right. If you made it this far, thanks for joining. Consider subscribing once again if we earned your business. Check out the channel, click it around on the playlist, get lost, do some binge watching. We'll see you again soon.